How's it going, Dave from Comic Book Investments? So I've been asked this a lot of times through comments and stuff. I figure I'd just make a video on it. Just kind of like my thoughts on what the current state of the market is, the comic book market. And it's kind of like, it's interesting. The comic market, is not alone on this. It's not just the comic market. It's the real estate market, other collectibles, all this kind of stuff. Even like crypto and things like that. I feel like, at least in the comic market, there's been a massive pullback. Like I wouldn't say a crash or anything like that, but it feels like the peak of comics for prices, not across the board, just in general, seem to be around mid-May to end of May, maybe even early June, depending on the book, but usually around mid-May. That seems to be, looking at all the graphs, looking at all the data, it seems to be about mid-May was the peak for comics, and now you'll see some of those going, shoot way up to mid-May, and then it's like, boom, way back down. I know like crypto took a big hit around this time. I know that in real estate that, you go back a couple months ago, and at least around here in Southern California, homes are flying. Like you'd list it and they'd be sold within like a day, and they'd have like tons and tons of offers. Not the case anymore. There are still some that have multiple offers and go above asking, but it seems like it's really slowed down where you might not even get a good offer your first week. Like I just put an offer on a house and it sat for 40 days. 40 days in this market, I know. So in terms of like the comic market, there's been a lot of books, like really hot books going down, like even bigger books too. Giant Size X-Men. It's been taking a massive beating. Spider-Man 129, those have been taking a massive beating. And I think a lot of it has to do with there was just so much hype and people were making so much money that they thought this was going to last forever. Nothing gold can stay. Robert Frost, someone corrected me. And just like Ultimate Fallout 4, right? It was just going up and up and up, but eventually it just can't go up forever. The people that are investing into comics, you invest in $300, it jumps to $900, 3x your money. But when it's $3,000, in order to 3x your money, it has to drop to $9,000. That's not happening. I haven't seen as much of a drop. Well, I actually have. Even in like Silver Age, the more rare stuff, there's still been a drop, but it doesn't seem as drastic as the Bronze Age, probably because the Bronze and Modern just went up so much so quick. And the Silver Age has more of many, many years of growth and many, many people investing in it. That's why I always say blue chip comics are a better way to go. And I think what happened was something like, Spider-Man 1, Fantasy 15. Yeah, there's a lot of them, but there's not as many compared to like a Hulk 181. So all these people would buy, Hulk 181s and holding it. It's like, oh, it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. And then all of a sudden it starts dipping, and then everyone's like, ooh, flood the market. Like I just did a video on Giant Size X-Men 1, and I can remember a couple months ago looking, and I was like, oh, there's barely any for sale. Now I look and I'm like, there's a giant whole page on eBay, like 200 listings almost of Giant Size X-Men #1s. And so the market's now flooded. Now it's like, it's not that rare. And someone that really has to sell it, they just drop the price. And then that, someone will eventually buy it, or, they go as an auction and it doesn't go for very much because now people are like, I'm staying away. I don't think this is alarm bells. I don't think you have to worry about this at all. I think I've even seen, May was a ridiculous month and part of June was kind of ridiculous, but now it's like back down to almost like March or April numbers, somewhere in there for certain books. And I've even seen them slowly, instead of going straight up and then straight down, I've seen it go down, but now I've seen it slowly go down, or I've even seen it go a little bit up, right? Not to May numbers, but that's just fine. I just think the whole frenzy of everyone just like, oh, buy anything and this is going to triple in value in a couple months. I think that's gone. I think we're going to go back to normal numbers. I think the market is just going to go back to what it was. Like we got this ridiculous weird boost, and now it's just going to go. And normally, comics don't go up like they have been. So if you're new to the comic industry and collecting and dealing or whatever it is, this is not normal. Like you might see a 10% jump or something in like on a comic, and that's like, oh, that's great, right? In a year, you know. You're not going to see these crazy numbers where you buy a book for $3,000 and then 6 months later it's now $9,000. Like that just doesn't happen. Like that's not normal. And for the past 6 months to a year, that's how it seems to be going. Like Ultimate Fallout 4 is a great example. It wasn't that much a couple years ago. Now it's just through the roof. And I get some of these books are based off of movies, TV shows, and different characters coming out, and that kind of stuff. I get that, and that definitely plays a role. But it seemed like the speculation bubble, so to speak, that everyone was speculating on every single book, and it just shot everything through the roof. And to the point where people were making so much money off of it that they ended up going like, oh, I'll just buy anything. And it just started going up. And then people are like, oh, they're getting FOMO. Like, oh, I got to get this, whatever it is, Hulk 181, I got to get it before it gets too expensive. Now there's like dropped off. So like, if you own these books and maybe you bought them at the peak, don't worry. These will all go back up over time. I could still easily see some more dropping off. Easily. I could see another 10, 20, maybe even 30%, depending on the book. But then I think things will level out and it'll go back to like steady, normal growth over time. And that's kind of like what you want. If you bought these before the peak, it doesn't matter. They'll still keep on going up. Like, you're still making money, right? If you bought them before the peak, even if you bought it at the tippity top, right? It might take a while, but they'll eventually get back up there. I always say, like, in Action Comics #1 was like when the first price guide came out in like 1970. It was like $300 or something like that. And where is it now? Millions. And you're still gonna see those crazy prices like on Heritage or something like that, Comic Link, whatever, where there's like a comic goes for like 1.2 million. It's like, oh my gosh, how could that ever? The last one sold was like 500. Yeah, you're gonna see those. Those are gonna be like the top end, and that's good. And also another thing, why not to worry? That's not doom and gloom. Blackstone, which is like a massive Wall Street investment fund company, they bought CGC's parent company CCG for $500 million. Now, if they don't see value in the collectible market, if they think it's just going to be stagnated or whatever or go down, like they wouldn't have done that deal. I mean, they're not idiots. They have $650 billion in assets. So they obviously saw this is a great opportunity to get in. So, and also that puts a lot of validity to the collectible market, comics, cards, all that kind of stuff, to your normal investor, right? Your normal investor, your everyday investor is not going to put money into comics. The only people that really put money into comics are people that love comics, right? Myself and probably you guys. And maybe the occasional wacky investor, right? Oh, I don't really care about comics, but I'm hearing this like kind of new thing, right? Comics are a good investment, right? But they don't really care. Or maybe they kind of like comics, like they watch the movies and like, oh, that's an interesting investing in comics. Sure, I'll do that, right? You're going to get those people, right? And the people that are into comics like us. But you're not going to get your traditional investor, the person that plops like $50 million on a painting, right? Or buys a ton of property, or, whatever, person that normally just dabbles in mutual funds and stocks and dividends and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to, and bonds and all that stuff. You're not going to get that average investor to get into comics because like, what? Comics? Ugh. But now that you have someone like Blackstone behind it and saying like, and putting validity to it, and then telling all their clients like, hey, we're going to put this fund together where we're going to have like the best comics. Look at like these charts that we made up, the comics going. They're going to be able to spread the word a lot better to the average investor that comics are a good investment. And I think that's just going to help this industry continue to grow and continue to stay strong. So comics are just going to still go up. If you buy them now, even if they're at the peak, 5-10 years, come talk to me, and I guarantee you it'll be worth a lot more than they were before. Not saying every single comic book is, right? But majority of the good comics to invest in, which are the blue chip comics, they will be. Even the Ultimate Fallout 4 will be worth more in 10 years than it is today. I can guarantee that. But if you have some obscure comic or obscure character that no one knows, let me tell you something. Comics and the characters are based off of supply and demand, and they're based off of popularity. There is tons of Golden Age characters that were popular at one point that no one cares about today, and their books just drop and go into obscurity, even if they're rare. Even if it's like, oh, there's only 10 copies. It's like no one cares about the character. It's gone. Worthless, right? That's how it is. So if you are investing in some obscure character, unless they pop off for some reason, they could go away out of the public space and no one will care about it and the comic will be worthless, right? So that's why I always say go for the blue chips, go for your Batmans or Spider-Mans or Supermans, stuff like that, Hulks, whatever, things like that. People have like 60 years of history, 70 years, 80 years, even 50 years, 30 years of history, and they're still relevant today. Those are the ones that will retain their value, even like a Deadpool, stuff like that. He's still going to be relevant in 20, 30 years from now. But there's people like the Green Llama, right? He's a Golden Age character. No one really knows who he is, and his comic books aren't really worth that much. Even though there's not that many out there, they're not really worth that much. So remember that. That's why movies and TV shows have such a pull on comics, because it puts it into the brains of billions, millions of people, and then they want that book. If they made a Green Llama movie, sure, Green Llama prices would go up. But as of now, he never made it out of the Golden Age. I don't know where he exists now. I'm sure he's in public domain and someone has him. And yeah, another one, crime does not pay comics. We're one of the biggest comics selling in the Golden Age, right? And I mean big as in millions of copies sold, like outselling like Superman and stuff like that, like tons. Even the old Daredevil comics, where he was like, he wasn't blind, he was mute. Yeah, it's very weird. It wasn't Marvel. Those were selling a ton of copies, but the crimes were selling millions of copies. And where are they today? Yeah, you have a few keys in there, right, that are still really popular, but for the majority of the crime doesn't pay and all that kind of stuff, no one really cares. They sell for nothing, right? Because no one cares about them. They're not in the public, space, So just remember that. But in terms of this comic market, we're just in a slump. It's fine. It's just a correction. They were going way too high, way too fast. If you sold at the peak, good for you. But I wouldn't worry about it. I think things are just going to go kind of back to how they were a year and prior. Like this past year, if you're new to comics, this is not normal. This is not normal at all. I had a Hulk 181 9.8. I believe it's either double or triple signature. Stan Lee, Herb Timpy, and maybe that was his double signature. Signed, gold label, 9.8. It sat for years. And you think and I had it up for 30,000, dropped down to 25, dropped down to 20. The best offer I ever got was like 16 or 17 for it. Finally sold it in Comic Link, and that was like 2, maybe 3 years ago. What is that book worth now? Like maybe at its peak, almost 100,000, right? And it sat for years. I had it for years, and it sat. So that's kind of like the market you're going to jump back into, is where you buy a book and it goes up maybe 10 or 20% in a year. But it's still good, right? It's just You can't have these things keep going up at the rate they're going up. They would just be out of reach for every single person on the planet, right? You can't just like, ultimate fallout floor triples every year. It's at $3,000, then at $9,000. Okay, cool. And then now it's at 27,000. It's like, Jesus, like who's gonna pay for that, right? So yeah, and then it's almost 100,000 after that. You know, keeps on going and going. Uh, and in a few years' time, it'll be almost $1 million. So it's just not going to happen. So I don't think it's a crash. It's not a crash. So it's just kind of a pullback. Also, people made comments, which I think is valid, is COVID restrictions have been lifted. So a lot of people are now like, I'm going to spend my money on a vacation. All right, that's very possible, all that kind of stuff. Going out and spending money on just having fun with people, right? Or whatever you want to do. Not spending on sitting in my house, spending on comics. It's very possible. So yeah, that's kind of like my thoughts on the current state. Let me know like your thoughts. I'm kind of curious to have different opinions. Like I said, the other opinion that I heard was, now people, since the restrictions are lifted, people maybe go on vacations. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And not spending it on comics and stuff like that. So yeah, let me know your thoughts and have a great day.